So welcome to the fourth episode of the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. I'm Tom Ferguson. Alongside me, as always, Scranton Prep head basketball coach, Coach Andrew Kettel. Coach, a little later than maybe we wanted to, but it's just after the district championships. It's been a crazy couple weeks here in NEPA, weather delaying some games and kind of pushing some stuff back, and finally found some time to get in the studio here.
Yeah. Looking back to the last week of January with Suits and Sneakers Week, the weather kind of threw basketball into a spin locally, and put us behind the eight ball with our podcast here. But we find time to get in here today, and we have a lot to talk about. Coaches versus Cancer up into district basketball and NCAA.
That's right. We're going to be talking to Coach Frank Martin from the University of South Carolina a little later on. You may know him from his exploits at Kansas State, led their team into the NCAA tournament multiple times, and then of course, first time in forever, South Carolina got all the way to a Final Four a couple years ago. The Gamecocks are having a little tougher of a season this year, but they're still in contention in the SEC. And of course, we'll talk to Coach Martin about that and Coaches versus Cancer as well. But let's recap Suits and Sneakers Week. It was kind of delayed. Weather kind of played a factor in that. But all in all, it seems like from various schools, it was another ringing success.
Yeah, it definitely was. And, this was the first time in 11 years of doing Suits and Sneakers Week here locally that we've had such a crazy weather issue. So the games were over a couple weeks because of the schedule conflicts with weather and the games being postponed. So, but we were concerned, like, our school's still going to have it. And our Coaches versus Cancer game at Scranton Prep was postponed 3 times.
Right.
But we finally got it in. We were able to do a doubleheader with our girls team, and then our team. And, I just want to thank, on behalf of Coaches versus Cancer and the committee and the American Cancer Society, want to thank all the coaches in Northeast Pennsylvania, the players, the families, the athletic directors, the administrators, for adjusting the schedules and staying with it. Because again, one more year, we had tremendous numbers, tremendous, social media presence with the games. We sold a ton of T-shirts and items, and off the top of my head, I know Valley View was near $10,000.
Wow.
Elk Lake did a great job again, as they always do. Scranton High School had some great events. I don't want to leave anyone out because everyone was really on board, and we just want to thank everyone for their continued support and dealing with all the weather stuff and still supporting Coaches versus Cancer. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Suits and Sneakers Week, another big success here in NEPA, despite being delayed with a lot of snow and ice and everything else that seems to happen every year. But we're able to get through that. And then, of course, not only is Suits and Sneakers Week backed up, but then the rest of the schedule backed up as well, and kind of getting crazy towards the end of the regular season. And then we just finished district playoffs here in our area. And of course, the state playoffs still to come starting next week. And that's always an interesting time around here, because you have all these games happening at all these different sites. And then the championship games happen down in Wilkes-Barre at Mohegan Sun Arena. It's a 10,000 seat arena that they reconfigure for usually configured for hockey. They configure it for basketball. And is this now the fourth?
The fourth.
Yeah. This was the 4th year they've done it down there. You've obviously been coaching at Scranton Prep since they started doing it. Well, to you, how much bigger does it make the district championship feel down at the arena?
It's phenomenal. We've been fortunate enough now to be there all 4 years, and it doesn't get old. Walking in there yesterday with the team, and with my own children who come on the bus with us, and I'm 43 years old. The hair on my arm stood up. You got the goosebumps. I mean, it feels like a big time game. You feel like you're on a big time stage, and that's what it's all about. Are there some things that they can improve on? Yes, but my hat goes off to District 2, the committee, for giving the student athletes of Northeast Pennsylvania the opportunity to play on that stage. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's now obviously the kids aren't necessarily used to playing in the arena, and that's probably one of the things we would talk about. If there's opportunities at practice time, ahead of time, or something like that, just to get players used to shooting, because it's cliche, but it ends up kind of playing out that the depth perception is really off with kids and trying to shoot in that arena.
Yeah. There are some people who don't like it. Of course, no matter what you do, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like what you do. But again, my belief is that you're giving kids an opportunity that they'll remember forever.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about. I mean, that in the grand scheme of things, that's what it's all about.
Right.
It's giving these kids an opportunity to say, yeah, you know what? I played there and that was great. And they could talk about it with their friends forever. But from a basketball standpoint, it's much different than a high school gym. It's much different than a local college gym.
Right.
The baskets are used twice a year for the Harlem Globetrotters and for this. So those baskets are brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the arena's 20 years old, those hoops are probably 20 years old. I don't know, but they're never used. So the rims are tight. And there's the depth perception is much different than a local gym. So, if they're ever able to give the teams an hour of a half court practice or something, I know it's difficult. I'm sure it's very hard. And I'm sure the committee is getting, tons of suggestions from the general public. But that would be the only thing that I think that if they could try and get some teams in there to shoot around a little bit and get the feel for it and have like a little practice, I think that would help. I think yesterday there was a stat out that no one had scored 50 points this weekend. Now, I'm not sure about the 6A game. I didn't see the score late.
It didn't hit 50. I know that much.
Yeah, so, we averaged over almost 70 points a game this year, over 60 points. I know there's some teams like Hazleton has a lot of firepower.
Right.
Abington Heights, of course, has a lot of firepower. But for teams that good who average, close to 70 points a game to not get 50, there's a little bit of an issue. But
and look, it may be the arena, it may be that kids just aren't used to shooting in there, but let's also give, I think, credit to a lot of the defense that's played in these games too. A lot of these matchups that we had this past weekend, you guys, Scranton Prep faced a really good Nanticoke team that's been really good down in the Wyoming Valley Conference. In the 3A boys championship, it was Wyoming Seminary and Holy Redeemer, two really solid defensive teams playing each other in that championship game. The Dunmore girls playing Holy Redeemer in the girls 3A championship. Dunmore undefeated and known for their defense, and Holy Redeemer really athletic, really big. They played a rock fight more or less in their game. It's might be shooting. It's also defense. I think this year especially, and this had kind of been a problem in past years, games weren't super close, but this year it just felt like everything was within a possession or two towards the end and at least going down to the final minute.
Yeah, I mean, the games were competitive. Thursday night, there was two 1-point games or one possession games with the Prep girls, and then followed by the Redeemer Sem game.
Right.
They're one possession games. Our game was a one possession game until we made some free throws down the stretch. So the competitiveness is terrific. I'm not trying to take away anything from anyone's defense or anything like that. Just like there's routine baskets that guys and girls don't miss usually that they're missing down there. So, but again, I am a full supporter of the arena. I think it's a terrific experience, and hats off to District 2 for continuing to be able to give our kids that opportunity.
Yeah, and now the focus obviously shifts from the district championship to the first rounds of the state tournament, which starts on Friday and Saturday this upcoming weekend. And you guys were successful in winning a district championship. You put yourselves into the state tournament, and I'm sure, I don't know if sites and times have been announced just yet publicly, but we'll find that stuff out. And that's a whole other craziness. Is kind of like, I can't imagine trying to configure that and trying to find out who's playing where and which games to go to. But that's got to be another exciting moment for you guys to get into the state championships again, and then to have an opportunity to hopefully try to contend for a state championship.
Yeah, it's our goal every year. I'm sure it's everyone's goal, to be able to play in March. That's when you want to be playing basketball in March. Some teams are going to play baseball and track, or lacrosse, and we're still playing hoops. So we're proud of that. It's something that we emphasize and our kids work for all year, just like many of the other teams.
Right.
It's a great experience, and it's a lot of fun, and it's challenging, which is great. I mean, everyone's good now. Everyone's good, and leading up to it this week, we'll have some great practices, and we've got some scouting to do, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Who, obviously, besides yourselves and besides the Prep girls team, who's a team that you think might have some potential to do some damage from our area as they get into the state tournament?
Well, I think you have to start with Abington Heights. They've been there. They know what it takes to win it. They have the experience. They have a lot of guys back. They are missing a key guy from last year's state run with Jackson Danzig, who's now at the University of Scranton. But they have a very good team, and I think you start with them in the 5A classification.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the girls' side, the team I think that has the most potential to possibly win a state championship or make a run is Dunmore.
Yeah.
Again, they have size, they have guards, they can shoot, and Coach Ben O'Brien's been there before and has the experience and is always well prepared. So I think those two teams stick out. Hopefully a couple other ones, including ours.
Yeah.
But I listen, we're at this time of year, it's really what's great about our community is the support you get from all the coaches locally. And we all want District 2 to be successful.
Right.
Like we're thrilled that Abington Heights had that great success and run last year. And hopefully someone else can do it this year, hopefully boys and girls, and we'll see what happens.
Right. I remember, was it last year or 2 years ago? Nanticoke had a run to the semifinal. Hazelton got all the way to the semifinal last year, and Dunmore got all the way to the semifinal a couple of years ago. And as you mentioned, they're undefeated this year and might have an opportunity to do that. I'm interested to see what happens with, I think the boys 2A bracket, Holy Cross, because that's a team that, I liken them a lot to a Michigan State, and that you never really know how they're going to be, but they're always solid, especially at the end of the season. And they just seem to put it together. And whether or not they go on to have a lot of success in March, that's, it just, anything can happen, but they're always a tough out once they get to the stage. Coach
Calais is a legend. The guy, he's been doing it so long. He wins every year. He always wins. And in the beginning of the year, you'll see his team, and then you'll see his team now, and they're two different teams.
Right.
They continue. That's a sign of a great program. Team that continues to get better as the season goes on and puts them in a position to be champions. And I wouldn't want to play them in the state tournament.
No.
He knows how to prepare. They're always well prepared. And again, another team who can possibly make a run. So, we have great student athletes here and we have great coaches. So, District 2 will be well represented in the state tournament.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that gets started here in Pennsylvania with the state championships. Now, coming up, we're going to talk a little more nationally, at least with Coach Frank Martin from the University of South Carolina, and how the Gamecocks are doing down in the SEC. So welcome back to the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. I'm Tom Ferguson, Coach Andrew Kettel joining me alongside, as always. And Coach, now time for our interview, our usual interview here during the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. And we got a great guest here today, Coach Frank Martin of the University of South Carolina joining us on the line. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm a little beat up late in the season, but I can't complain. It's all good.
Yeah, it's been kind of an up and down one this year for the Gamecocks. 14-15 this year. You guys are getting towards the end of the SEC regular season schedule. It's been a grind. What's kind of your assessment so far of how South Carolina's performed?
Yeah, we've had so many injuries to overcome. We're down to 7 players right now.
Wow.
We've only have 2 guards available, so. We've had to, in the last 3 days, rediscover how we've prepared to play for the last 6 weeks after rediscovering how we were going to play after Christmas because of some of the injuries that we had. And but we're still the 4th seed in the SEC, and somehow, somewhere, we got 2 games to go. We got to figure out a way to go to Texas A&M and play better than we did at Missouri. And then finish it off with a solid, hopefully, senior day against Georgia at home a week from yesterday.
What's kind of your assessment of the SEC so far this year? I feel like for a long time, the SEC had kind of been top heavy, but this year especially, it feels like there's a lot of good, solid, nationally ranked or close to nationally ranked teams this year.
It's real good. It's over the last 3 years, we've recruited more top 100 players than any conference in the country.
Wow.
The coaches in the league, I'm willing to put up the NCAA tournament success that the coaches in this league have had in the past against any league in the country. And you're seeing all of it kind of come together. And it's become a league that if you take the top 3 teams out and then you take 4 to 14, you can pretty much swap everyone's records around that's how close it is. It's
Mhm.
every game. It comes down to the wire, and it's some of us have been fortunate that won more than the others.
We got Coach Frank Martin here from the South Carolina Gamecocks joining us on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. I'm Tom Ferguson, Coach Andrew Kettel alongside me. Coach, you mentioned kind of the injuries and having to kind of deal with that and kind of recalibrate your team multiple times throughout the season. How do you manage your expectations of what your team can do as you're kind of dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's we during the course of the year, we've lost for the season our starting point guard, our starting two, and our starting small forward. And in the preseason, we lost the guy I expected to be our first big off the bench for 7 weeks with a knee injury, and he's back now, but he's a freshman and he's completely lost. It's he has struggled to catch up to some of the stuff that you as a freshman you learn in the preseason. But it's our job, coaches, to lead, not and anyone that's in a leadership role. When you face some kind of adversity, whether it be a loss, an injury, whatever it may be, you don't go into your team and start feeling sorry for yourself, because if you do, then those kids don't know what to do other than feel sorry, and then you can't succeed.
Right.
Life taught me a long time ago as I was growing up, don't get wrapped up with what you don't have. Embrace what you do have and make the best of it, and that's what we've tried to do.
That's great.
That's perfect advice. And Coach, you've spent a couple years now at South Carolina. How do you feel you've kind of gotten comfortable with your role there with the Gamecocks now that you've been a couple years? Are you kind of finally settled in and kind of got your stuff in place there?
Yeah, I mean, when you spend 7 years somewhere and I believe getting involved in the community and you get to know so many people, so we can make an impact using my job title as a way to create more things to empower young people to succeed in life. It's something that gets you ingrained in the community and separates you from basketball. I think some of the mistakes that we all make in this business sometimes is we get too consumed with basketball or our sport and winning and losing, and we forget that we're a member of the community that we live in. And in a place like Columbia, South Carolina, that's such a family-driven town, those things are so important. And I'm a proud member of this community.
We talk a lot, obviously, on this Coaches versus Cancer podcast about cancer and kind of dealing with it, and certainly the fundraising efforts that kind of happened. We hadn't really had a chance to recap nationally what happened with Suits and Sneakers Week, and a lot of the conversation we had in the last episode was about how Suits and Sneakers Week and those kind of games have taken on almost a life of themselves. They're almost up to emotionally those days of the senior days, that like just from where the players are. Is that kind of your experience at South Carolina, that players seem to get up for those kinds of games?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I'm sure players kind of like tried to figure out why are these guys wearing sneakers for this game when it started, and you talk to your team about it, and when social media and 24-hour news cycles, everyone picks up on the fact that coaches in our sport put on them sneakers to not to look cool, but to actually bring awareness that we're all united in the mission to fight this crazy disease called cancer, and our commitment to do that. And I think it's become a powerful week. It started as a game, and now it's a week, and that's the way it should be. Continue to bring as much attention as we can to everyone that pays attention to college basketball, so everyone understands that as coaches, we're so united in this mission.
And for you, being involved with Coaches versus Cancer, what when you see your kids, your athletes kind of getting involved, and maybe I'm sure there's been stories of people and family members that have had to deal with this, that maybe they have to get those stories out and to get involved with this. What's it like for you to see your players be involved with it?
Yeah, it's great. It's a big part of my responsibility is to teach kids that it's not about them; it's about others. And when you go through a season and kids see that, because we ask our players to go in the community and do all kinds of community service and all that. If I don't do it, then what am I really serving if I'm making them do something that then I don't stand up for myself. So when they see how involved I am and how important it is for me to be involved in something that's greater than basketball, something that's greater than South Carolina, myself, or anyone, that's a mission to help others. I think it creates a powerful statement that players embrace it, players get excited for it, and and like I've done here in the community before. When we've had our functions, we take all the flower arrangements and all the things that we had left over, and our players take it to the cancer hospital the next day, and they get to spend time with cancer patients and see the battle that they're fighting while they're in there getting treatment and things of that nature. So it all the way across the board, it's part of the educational responsibility that we all have in preparing our young guys to go into the society, go into communities that they're going to live in as men, and continue to make positive impacts.
That's great, Coach. Just to give you the information about what we do here in Northeast Pennsylvania, we're a high school-based Coaches versus Cancer campaign, and we have over 40 high schools, boys and girls teams, all different clubs inside of those schools, student councils, you name it. We have a lot of support locally. If you were able to share a message with these student athletes and families and communities here in Northeast Pennsylvania, what could you say to them about how the importance of continuing to raise awareness and raise funds for Coaches versus Cancer and other community-based programs that they may be involved in?
Yeah, all I can say is this: after spending 16 years as a high school basketball coach and mathematics teacher in South Florida, where I grew up and was a school teacher, and I could not wait when I got to college to be able to become a part of Coaches versus Cancer. You don't have to be and what I've learned is you don't have to be a college coach to be a part of Coaches versus Cancer. Anything that can be done impacts the life of people that are really struggling in a positive way. What Coaches versus Cancer does in helping individuals that are fighting cancer, because all we always think about is the person that's fighting the battle, but how about the surrounding family members that have to support that young person, that have to lose their jobs because they're trying to help that person to transport them and take them back and forth during their caregiving. We need everyone on board, and whatever's done up there in Pennsylvania, we as college coaches can't be more thankful than what we show and we try to do is, and all we're trying to do is create awareness that people all over the world, not just our country, anything that can be done is much needed, and is something that's going to help somebody. It could save someone's life, and it can bring peace to a whole family, and it's something that's so necessary.
Absolutely. Coach, we appreciate your time with us, giving it to us here this morning, and talking about Coaches versus Cancer and how important the message is. Coach Frank Martin from South Carolina. Coach, we appreciate it.
Coach,
appreciate you guys. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, Coach. Good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
So thanks to Coach Frank Martin for joining us here on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank. I'm Tom Ferguson, Coach Andrew Kettel alongside me. And, this is a guy that has had a ton of success so far in his head coaching career in the NCAA. And I wish we had more time with him. Unfortunately, we had to kind of cut it short because he's a busy guy. He's got things going on. But he, while not having had cancer, has, at least from a medical perspective, has had something that would maybe give him that kind of perspective that a cancer survivor would have.
Sure, a life-threatening issue. Almost passed away.
Right.
Thank God he's still here and he's healthy now and leading the Gamecocks. But he's an inspiration from that standpoint, and he's heavily involved nationally with Coaches versus Cancer.
He, for those who may not know, Coach Martin had, I think it was stomach ulcers or something like that, had gotten into his intestines, or it kind of just came abruptly out of nowhere. And I think I read it was a 105-degree fever, was turning yellow or something like that in the hospital, and had literally called his wife to tell her that he wasn't going to make it, that this was probably going to be it. And by some grace of God or otherwise, managed to pull himself out of it in the hospital, and it turned into one of the more intense but entertaining head basketball coaches in America. Did a great job turning Kansas State into a perennial Big 12 and national power in terms of getting to the tournament, and is doing the same thing, at least with the Gamecocks. Got them to the Final Four for the first time in forever 2 years ago.
Yep.
And just you can tell even just by talking to him, he's someone who needs to be involved. He needs to be, as you mentioned, in the community and involved nationally with Coaches versus Cancer. He mentioned it in the interview we just had, that he couldn't wait to get to college because he knew where Coaches versus Cancer was, and he wanted to be in there day one. Yeah,
you could tell he wanted to be a part. He wants to be a part of something bigger than the game of basketball. I mean, he talked about it in his involvement in the community,
right?
In South Carolina, and you know what's great about Coach Martin, and it's unique, honestly, with Division I coaches, is he was a high school teacher and a high school coach,
right?
And that really doesn't happen anymore. College basketball coaches usually are former players who become grad assistants, or managers that become grad assistants, and they work their way through the college ranks, and they learn the recruiting scheme and all those things that go along with compliance and all that. But
right.
there's not many guys who go from high school to college like there was, years ago.
Sure.
So it's neat to see a guy who has a perspective from the high school level all the way up to the highest level in the SEC.
Yeah, and he was someone who was an assistant with Coach Bob Huggins, who obviously is legendary in the college basketball ranks, and that's where he picked up that disease and was able to, or that illness, and was able to overcome that, and eventually became the head coach at Kansas State when Bob Huggins moved on, and the rest, as they say, was history for him, and he's been able to turn that into a great coaching career. It's funny, he is intense, but every story I hear about him off camera is about what a great, genuine person he is.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet him last year at the Final Four, and great guy, and talked about high school basketball and wanted to hear about us, and genuine guy.
Yeah,
he didn't have to ask us about our team or anything like that, but just a genuine guy, a basketball guy, and a true educator.
So obviously, Suits and Sneakers Week over and done with. Still have the state playoffs to come here with basketball in our area. Before that wraps up, the next episode on the Coaches versus Cancer podcast, we'll be talking about kind of the end of season thing that you guys do every year with your big blowout.
Yeah, looking forward to our event in May at Glenmara Country Club. We're having our gala this year. Our basketball will be there. So it's a new venue. We're going to mix it up a little bit. We're excited about the opportunities to change things up, but obviously the goal is still the same, to pack the place and have a great night in raising some funds for Coaches versus Cancer.
And of course, we'll have more information about that on the next Coaches versus Cancer podcast, and looking forward to getting that and hopefully talking about the state playoffs and how they went, and hopefully this year too, we get I think last year was a pretty exciting NCAA tournament. We had a 16 seed over a 1 seed. Hopefully we'll have something like that to recap in the next episode.
Sounds good.
That's the hope. But that's it for the Coaches versus Cancer podcast. For Coach Frank Martin, thanks to him for joining us. For Coach Andrew Kettel, I'm Tom Ferguson. This has been the Coaches versus Cancer podcast presented by Fidelity Bank.